Good night, everyone. Is everybody hearing me okay? Is showing you hearing me all right?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. All right, so before I start part 2 of Earth Matters, I want to say a word of prayer before I start. Father Almighty, give you thanks and praise to come before thee once again and the opportunity to share what you have, the little wisdom you have blessed me with your people, O Lord. I ask you to take charge of the proceedings this evening. Use me like you have never used me before as I present. May your name be glorified and may it edify your people to bring honor and glory to your name is my prayer, thanksgiving. Amen. Okay, so good night, everyone, once again. We're going into Earth Matters part 2, where we left off about 2 weeks ago. So here we go. All right, so we want to do a little review of what we did the last time, especially also for those of you who wasn't here for the last meeting. We talked about the earth and where did this name came from. This was one of the things, and it's an old English or Germanic word meaning ground and the earth. And that's where the word earth came from. Went on to say, well, why the earth matters. And we understood that soil is a mixture of organic matters, minerals, gases, fluids, and organisms that is put together to support life. God in his wisdom, and I mentioned, even as I was going through preparing again today, I remember the presentation by Elder Wade and Sabbath Gone, and this have so much to do with how God created the earth when he separated the waters, and how this earth, how it really was put in place for us and to support our life. And continue why Earth Matters, called the pediosphere, has 4 parts, 4 important functions as a medium for plant growth, as a means of storage of water, the supply of it, and the purification, as a modifier of the Earth's atmosphere, and as a habitat for organisms. Of course, we know the topsoil is very important and it supports plant growth, and a medium, of course, it stores water, the same water that the plants use to grow, and even water for us to drink. As the water also passes through the soil, it's also purified, and it's also, because it's stored water, eventually it supplies back this water to us for us to drink. As a modifier, the earth, also the trees, when the trees grow up, it also helps with controlling the carbon content in our atmosphere, provides oxygen. It also beautifies the place, provides food. It creates a habitat for wildlife, so it actually modifies the atmosphere when we get when it plays this important part to support life and through plants and even animals. And of course, it's a habitat for organisms that some we see, some we don't. We know we have a lot of microorganisms in the soil, and they provide the means for the medium for the plant to grow, or for the health of the soil or the quality of the soil. These organisms contribute a whole lot to that, plays a very important function in the soil. So as a result, all aspects of our lives are impacted by the earth. We learned about some positive and negative examples. We talked about how the impact, negative impact as in flash flooding as a result of how we practices as man has made or used in the saying of advancing in technology and advancing for mankind, some of the problems that we experience, and of course, all the lessons we can learn from nature, even by being involved in agriculture and even just studying all the trees and all the stuff that God has blessed us with. We can learn so much lessons just from in nature. So it even impacts our spiritual lives, our social lives, our physical life, and even our mental life. These are some of the positive and possibly and also negative examples if we do things wrong, how we can be impacted, and that is why the earth really matters. So what are earth matter issues? We talked about degradation, which is the process something is made worse, and yes, after certain things got bad, but man continue as we progress, we continue to make things worse, and the earth has continually been degraded time and time again. And of course, with the degradation, we some examples. These are some examples of degradation. We have soil erosion, contamination, acidification, sheet erosion, silting of the soil, aridification, salinization, urbanization, etc. And all of these are just some of the examples of degradation as a result of what man has been doing here on the earth. Of course, we have causes, consequences as a result, and causes. Of course, some of the consequences we discussed the last time was talked about flash flooding, we talked about mudslides, we talked of flooding, just to name a few. And some of these causes, all of the causes, if not directly, was indirectly caused by mankind activities here on Earth, most of them. And sad to say, but that is what is a direct result of our fall from the original plan when at creation. So we rolling over into this week's session, and we were going to talk about some of the best practices and restoration are the only means we can work on making things better. And we're going to talk about some of the things now that could help do that. So, it is said by the French scientists, depleted worn-out soil can be restored to a state of optimum fertility without the use of any fertilizer, which is the NPK, providing the soil is treated in such a way as to enhance the microbial life in it. So we see there's hope, just like how there's hope for us as sinners. We can be restored, and so the soil can be restored also if we go back to the original plan. And it doesn't include any fertilizers. It's all about the microbial life in it, just like how it takes, we cannot do nothing of ourselves. It's something out of us, Christ in us, out of our life that can restore our life. Is the same thing. If we remove the microbial life from the soil, we have to add that back into the soil to give it life, and to help it to be restored. No chemical can help that. And of course, the chemical will be working, wouldn't be in the interest to enhance the microbial life in the soil anyway. So just like us, we need that life from outside to help restore the soil. So one of the things I mentioned in closing last time to carry out an assessment of the property and plan based on your findings of what they find on the property. I had a list of things to look at. There may be more. I am not the total professional on all these matters, but there will be more aspects that you can look into in an assessment and even plan based on findings. And as I go along, when we come to the end, of course, some of these contributions I'll appreciate for the well-being for everybody else who's listening in on the program also. So first thing I want to talk about as I continue, the first on the list is topography. And what it is, topography. Topography represents a particular area in detail. It includes everything natural and man-made, hills, valleys, roads and lakes, etc. So it will also include like buildings. It will include things like the airport, bridges, of course, the natural things like rivers, streams. If there's any caves, all those kind of things make up the topography. And topography came from the Greek word topo, means where it is, and graphy means the writing of where it is. So topography is just where things are. Usually topography has to do with a lot of mapping, and you will have things like they're called topography maps or topo maps with these information on it. These maps could also be established in layer and on the map, and some of these layers will include man-made stuff like buildings, as mentioned before, roads, utilities, etc. And then you have the land formation side of it, which will include things like elevation, streams, vegetation, maybe type of forests would include vegetation, maybe where it have lakes, you name it, natural formation, all those some lakes formation. It's just either one or the other. And these maps will have different layers. You can have a map with just elevation information, maps with just stream information, maps with just soil information. That's called a soil map, and so on and so on. So just where you find the different elevation or different stuff is what a topo map is all about. So land formation is important to aid with the best practices in the development and planning. All right, so we want to zero in on more land formation, part of it, the natural side of stuff, and to do with your property. And it do only zero in on immediate your property, but you should take a look at the adjacent properties in the area too, the topography there, because sometimes in a lot of cases, you could impact somebody or somebody could impact your property based on the topography and how things are done on the land, in the development of the land, right? So, so remember, like I said, we have to consider not just your topography, but the topography around. And in coming up in the other slides on other topics, we will be back and forth because all of these sections kind of tie into each other, and one action will impact the other, or sometimes in some cases the same thing you have to do with one of these areas in one of these areas you have to do in other areas. So you may be hearing me saying some things over and over in some of the areas. But one of the most important part of the of this section too is the soil types. And the United States Department of Agriculture defined 12 major texture types of classifications of soil. And it's sand, loam, loomy sand, sandy loam, loam, silt, sandy clay, loam, clay loam, silty clay loam, sandy clay, silty clay, and clay. all these different classifications is just generally made up of three main parts, but it all have to do with the quantity of some of them that determines these major classifications that they have grouped them in. And this is the agriculture department. And there are other types of classifications of soil, right? Soil textures are classified by fraction of sand, silt, and clay in it, like I said, and classifications are typically named for the primary constituent particle size or combination of the most abundant particle size. Example, sand, clay, silty clay. Looms are soil at roughly equal proportions, soils having roughly equal proportions of sand, silt, and or clay in a soil sample. So the main things the soil is made up of is the sand, clay, and the silt. And based on the proportion, it determines what the soil is called. Even there are different classification, and soils are classified by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. They have it in 4 hydrological groups, and this have to do with the hydrological have to do with the water, how the soil, and this is based on the soil runoff potential. They have 4 classes or groups. They are A, B, C, and D. So let's take a listen or take a look at what the effect or the potential runoff of these different classes. A generally have the smallest runoff potential, and D has the greatest. So group A, sand, loomy sand, or sandy loam type soil has low runoff potential and high infiltration rates, even when thoroughly wetted. This consists chiefly of deep, excessive drained sand or gravels and have a high rate of water transmission. So this soil, of course, if you pour water, I don't know if anybody ever see on the beach when the water come up on the shore, it just kind of, on the sand, it just kind of disappear because the waters just kind of sink into the sand, is absorbed by the sand because there's not enough flow.
Yes.
All right, this is how the water actually absorb the soil, absorb the sand, absorb the water. So the water is actually retarded by this sand. And probably that's why we have sands on the seashore. And God have it that way. If it was clay, the water might have rushed straight up on the land or further inland. But because it's sand, it's absorbed and the water is staying right where it's supposed to.
Praise the Lord, man.
So this type, of course, if you have that kind of soil on your land, you wouldn't have as much major kind of like erosion because the water will be, the potential for high runoff is reduced. You have high infiltration, so the water will sink down into the soil and go underground technically. So that is one thing about, that is group A. Group B now, you have silty loam or loam. It has a moderate infiltration rate when thoroughly wet and consists chiefly of moderately deep to deep. Sorry, let me read that over. When thoroughly wet, it consists chiefly of moderately deep to deep, moderately well drained soil with moderately fine to moderately coarse textures. This is almost like a tongue twister. But this one, of course, it has a little higher potential with the runoff. It has a moderate infiltration rate. So of course, the water wouldn't disappear like how it would disappear in the sand. but the textures are coarser in this, moderately coarser. And this still will control the flow of the water to some extent, but it do have the potential as group A, all right? And group C, we have sandy clay loam. They have low infiltration rates, even when thoroughly wetted, and consists chiefly of soil with a layer of impervious downward movement, with a layer that impedes downward movement of the water, and soils with moderate to fine structure. So as we going more on the clay side, the soil is getting finer in structure, and they really sticks close together, so water cannot pass through the fine particles as well as with sand, and even with the group B soil. Of course, as a result of this, because the water cannot impedes downward into the soil, they find most of the water will stay on top, so this water will have a greater potential of runoff, right? And group D, clay loam, silt clay loam, sand clay, silty clay, or clay has the highest runoff potential. They have low infiltration rates when thoroughly wetted, and consist chiefly of clay soils with high swelling potential. Soils with a permanent high water table, soils with a clay pan or clay layer or near the surface, and shallow soils over nearly impervious material. This soil, actually, we have a good area of Trinidad and Tobago with a good example of this type of soil. And that area is called, just to the east of us, here in Aruca in particular, the Arepo savannas, has a impervious clay pan, as they call it. During the rainy time, it's a total swamp, and when it's dry, it's terribly dry. Soil is very shallow, so you find these areas don't support large trees. The trees are very stunted and that kind of stuff, because there's no, and these places the nutrition in the soil are very low. And that is one of the areas. It's actually drained now, and because of all the things that have been done during World War II with the drainage, so you find usually some of the water runs off, but if it was natural, it would have almost be like a lake during the wet season. So, but because it's all flat, it don't run off. But if it was a hill, it would have. And that is why sometimes you see, even on places where you have a lot of runoff, it goes down to the clay when all the topsoil is eroded away, and you just constantly have a lot of runoff, very, very easy on these areas with the clay soil. This would contribute, of course, if we lost all of the topsoil, what we'll have is a lot of more flash flooding as a result of this continuous runoff. So that is some of the things we have to consider when we're looking at the soil that we have in our property, and how to do things to mitigate these stuff. So when we go into drainage now, we're gonna touch back on topography, and again on soil, because the topography and the soil can or will have a great impact on the drainage of the property. Of course, we just discussed the different type of soils, the potential of the runoff, and of course, topography being, we talking about if it's hilly, if it's also, if there is any streams or any access to the water to run off, because we're talking about all the natural features in the topography in this case, right? So let us check out some of the things that can help. This can be aided, also drainage can be aided by vegetation and the appropriate structural development as required. So, so of course, the vegetation, if you have a lot of trees, it could help again with the runoff or with the drainage on the land. The appropriate structural development. If you have enough bridges or maybe drainage, that could help also with the proper removal of the water and the property. All right, so we'll take a look to aid and enhance. So we're looking at things that will aid and enhance the natural drainage of the property. Of course, some of the things people do when they're developing, they try to redirect the natural water courses. We try to avoid that as much as possible. Leave a buffer zone along streams and rivers. A buffer zone is, in some places they call it a riparian zone. I don't know if you ever seen any aerial shots of property and there's a nice row of trees along a river or a stream. That is the buffer zone or the riparian zone. You're supposed to at least, in the United States, they recommend up to like a riparian zone or a buffer zone at least 50 feet from streams and rivers. In Trinidad, and before I even say that, I've even seen where they recommend even up to 100 feet away from rivers. In Trinidad, a minimum of like about 15 to 20 feet is required, should be applied in these cases to keep this buffer zone along the streams and rivers. One, of course, it will help prevent erosion of your stream banks, and also it will, by holding the soil, the roots holding the soil along the river banks, it will also create a flood zone also. So like even if the river overflow or anything, the trees will help slow down or impede water from rushing all over the place. Of course, it will be animals also access these rivers for water and stuff. So you find that too will be a sheltered area, some form of protection for them. But it's in our best interest if we keep these buffer zones along streams and rivers to protect the river's edge, prevent erosion and that kind of stuff. And then it will also enhance drainage if bank of the river stop falling over into the river and creating sediments and making the river even shallower. One of the other things too on slopes, this is where the topography part come in. If the topography of a land have hills and slopes, the building of check dams on slopes. And these is like, usually you'll have converging slopes where you might have a natural drain form coming down a hill. What you do is you build check dams, and that may be something I may have to, some other stuff I know I written up in this that may have to go into to show you all what, to talk about what check dams are, but they are live check dams where you actually plant trees. And what you do is actually you make a dam, you dig out a portion of this drain and you block it up. And you use like sticks and you actually plant. There's a tree I mentioned later on, they call it a live fence. You actually plant that across, you plant pieces of branches and stuff across. So when the water rushes down, it actually would hit that and reduce the velocity of the water. So in reducing the velocity of the water, it reduces the ability to create erosion. Also, this check dam also any soil that has been eroded higher up will come and settle in this check dam. And that's another thing you have to do too. You have to maintain the check dam. So what you do, you dig out the soil ever so often when the check dam is being filled up, and you put it back, because this is now topsoil that you losing higher up. And you take back this topsoil and you apply it back to your land. So you won't lose much of your topsoil. And sometimes you may need more than one check dam on a stream or on a waterway, but you can make these live check dams. You can make it out of rocks also. You can make it, you can actually cast check dams also, but these check dams does a great job, and it improves the quality of the water lower downstream, because because of the fact that a lot of the sediments get to settle in these check dams. It helps with the quality of water available also downstream. So another thing, I think I mentioned this last week, avoid clear felling all of the forest trees. Of course, I mentioned last week, I think this was one of the examples I used. The forest trees kind of intercept the raindrops, and but when it hit the leaves and they gently fall to the ground, also below the forest trees, there are a lot of leaves that the tree would have dropped. And when the water hit that, it gently percolate along through this leaf bed that's on the ground, and gently goes down into the ground and reduce the runoff. And this water now actually gets to penetrate the soil. If there weren't any trees, the water will hit the soil directly, contribute to what they call impact erosion, and run right off. It wouldn't have a chance to percolate into the soil. And we'll see what are some of the side effects or the downfall of this occurring also, beside just the runoff and the erosion or the issues with drainage that it can create. Another thing too, when planting along hillsides, plant along the contour of the slope. That's another best practice we can use to help with the erosion and to help hold the soil. I have seen, where I live here in the Lopino Valley, just north of me, farmers plant on the hill, and they hardly ever use that technique, planting along the contour of the hill. Another technique you can use is the terracing method. Can also be used for planting on hillside. And you know about the rice paddies in Asia, where they plant, where you have like these nice flowing steps along the hillside, looking very, very like a real manicured garden, where they plant along the hills. That is using the terracing method along the hillside. And that also follows the contour of the hill. Now there's a simple way of finding the contour along a hillside using a simple tool called an A-frame. And this tool is simply made out of wood in the shape of an A, and uses a plumber. And you can use that to navigate along a hillside to find any contour along any hillside, and you just mark it as you go. That would be something else too that maybe in the future I can probably try and post some links to some videos, how to use an A-frame and all that kind of stuff. So you can find contours for people who lives on hills, and it would come in handy. Or who developing land or have to plant on a hill, how to find these contours to plant along, and even to aid with finding if you want to develop a terrace also. Right here in Takariga, forestry has a location up on St. Michael Road. A lot of people go up there to walk here in the Aruka and on the east. and ride mountain bikes. That area, they have a lot of this terracing, use the terracing technique for planting there. It's and also they have a lot of check dams in that area too, where they help manage the water along the hillsides there. And some of the benefits and results you see from the terracing that I was, and also the check dams, was proven that they have a pond there that throughout the year has water in it, and the water you can literally drink directly from this small pond. It's always clear. That area is not very rocky or anything, but the water is always crystal clear. And again, later on as we talk, you're gonna talk about how this is possible as a result of the methods that they're using there. So a couple other things to do, like I said, you have to maintain your water courses also and your check dams. Of course, if you have a stream by and you have you may have a lot of bamboo or tree fell in it and that kind of thing, you clear it out to make sure you don't impede the flow of the water and create a flooding, or the water will want to recut a new route as a result of the obstruction and all that kind of stuff. So you maintain your water courses and your check dams also, so that they will continue to be fully effective and continue to maintain the good drainage you have on the property as a result of all these techniques you use. Keeping the know of current upstream and downstream situations. Of course, you have to know what's happening around you. If downstream you have a big obstruction, of course, water it can impact your property, and even if you have a situation upstream, you may have to do some mitigation to deal with what might come your way also. So these are some of the things. You're always in the know of what's happening upstream and downstream, especially when coming into what we consider the rainy season also. Although now we don't really have very much of a rainy season because there is rain almost all year, but we still make sure and check during those peak times, after any real heavy rainfall and that kind of stuff too. Sometimes trees fall, things go down, so you could just go and take a walk and see if there's any negative impact to the water courses and that kind of stuff, so that you can keep things in order to prevent any drainage issues as the days go on. So the other thing is trees and vegetation. And this can be used as an indicator of the status of the property flora, and things that can indicate what type of secondary forest it is, if it may be a secondary forest due to maybe fire or some past abandoned agricultural estate. We have a lot of cocoa and coffee estates throughout the island, and it could be a secondary forest as a result of that, or it could have been maybe some we have a lot of areas too in South. I've gone to a lot of places where have abandoned oil fields and forests all grown back up. So you can see what type of forest, or maybe it could have been a natural disaster, maybe piece of landslip and the whole place cleared down and then it's growing back as a result. Sometimes these places can tell what happened due to some of the trees. We're going to talk about that just now. I think this is a typo. What is the succession of the forest? I think I made a typo with that word, succession. And it could be succession of the forest. It could be either pioneer or intermediate, or maybe a climatic forest. And so how you can tell that again is because of the type of trees you have in the forest or on the land. If you see a lot of trees like guacano or buffalo trees, these will tell you that it is a kind of pioneer forest, because these are the softer trees and they grow up pretty fast. If you see a lot of that, is because the land has been largely cleared for some reason or the other, and it's now rejuvenating. Some of the other trees you may find in the intermediate, things like hog plum. You may find things like, might stand a chance, find cedars. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember dolphin tree. Those are some of the softer, the intermediate, what you'll find there in those type of forests. And in the climatic, you'll find the things like the puis and the balatas and all the harder woods are the last set, and those would be in the climatic forest, all the harder woods. So some of these things will tell you if the type of forest, or how long the place have been, if it was recently or in past disturbed, how long it has been disturbed, or how long it has been left in a natural state, would help with those kind of stuff. And can also help zero in on the soil quality. They say where you see a lot of palm trees, usually the soil is not the best. It's kind of used as an indicator also on the soil quality. There are other plants also used to give a good indication of the soil quality too. And but the palms is one that I understand used as an indicator for the soil quality when you see them growing. So as a result, the following can be determined, like I said, the soil condition, trees, the vegetation, the drainage also can be determined by having trees on the soil, on the property, chances to find a water source also, signs of wildlife, because of course wildlife needs food and they need shelter, they need a habitat. Also infrastructure, if there's any infrastructure and landslips, can all be determined by some of the trees found on the land. Like if you have a major infrastructure, depending on how long ago it was built, you find you might have an intermediate forest, or maybe a pioneer forest. Seeing a lot of pioneer species, right? So that could help determine what's going on. Trees and vegetation, how they can be used. They can be used by to maintain, and they can be to replant forest trees. You maintain them and you replant them, the forest trees. Fruit trees are also recommended, and short crops can be planted temporarily on a rotation basis. That is among these forest trees. Like if you have a pioneer forest where you have some guacano growing, you can clear that area and maybe plant some banana plants in the interim, and you can still plant a couple forest trees among that and let them grow. Usually the intermediate species of trees during the intermediate forest, they are relatively shade tolerant and will grow underneath these plants and will grow bigger afterwards. Still, and when they grow up big, even the bananas will are relatively shade tolerant will still be able to produce under those conditions. And one thing to note, sometimes some of these methods I might mention might be somewhat kind of conflicting with somebody that might be doing strictly agriculture. But this technique is a technique also called agroforestry, where you mix um, forestry with agricultural plants. So sometimes and what you would have forest trees growing together with food crops. And like when after how much umpteen years, well, I mean, we wouldn't be out there for all that amount of years, but there may be a tree that might be growing that we may want to harvest later down the road for maybe to build a house or repair something. And when you remove that tree, the clearing that tree will create, you plant some short crops again around that area. So you protect the area where the tree was, because usually when you cut down the tree, sometimes it might bring down maybe 1 or 2 trees with it, depending on how tight the forest is. And you plant these short crops to grow there in the meantime, and you can plant back another tree. It could even be a fruit tree. And while that tree grow, you harvest the other fruits, and you may go somewhere else. You may need wood for some other reason somewhere, and you may cut a tree here again. And so you do it on a rotation basis, so that you wouldn't say like thin out the forest too much, and you'll always have food to eat all the time, and continue rotating that planting method in the forest, and it will generate enough food continuously for you. So how the trees and vegetation can enhance? How can they enhance? Trees and grass, you could use it for the live fence tree. I could never remember the name of that tree, but that tree, well, you can use it for fencing. You can use it in the in even the check dams, and you could keep cutting it ever so often, and it will continue to grow. People use it for fence on their farms and things, and just run barbed wire along and just keep trimming it ever so often, so I wouldn't grow into a full tree. The vetiver also can be used and all these techniques is to use specific application to conserve soil. So the vetiver also will help, the vetiver grass will also help hold the soil, and because these grass, the roots grow up to like 10 feet into the soil and could really help with the conservation of soil and prevent land slippage and runoff and all these kind of things. And this too, when you're planting the vetiver on the hillside, to help manage the soil, you have to plant this also too along the contour of the hill to get the for it to be most effective when you have to use it on a hillside. Of course, they can enhance aesthetics. They provide a source of food, material, and of course, medicine too. The vetiver, also the grass itself is used to make hats and bags, weaved into a lot of stuff. And the root, I understand, you can use it to make an oil also. The trees will enhance and provide wildlife habitat, fresh air. Of course, it will enhance and reduce soil erosion, water filtration by the mitigation of the rainfall as the water gently percolates off the leaves and get down into the soil. The watershed, and that water also, besides just the filtration, the water that enters in the soil goes down into the watershed and make water available via springs and streams, and later down. That's how we can make sure that we have contribute to a good source of water while we're outside there. if we maintain trees and vegetation, and particularly the trees. Also, it helps with carbon sequestration. Um, Trees is a big carbon sink. So of course, you know, a lot of these, we are even so a carbon sink to some extent. We are made up of carbon too. But of course, the trees are carbon, made up of carbon. So it stores a lot of the carbon that we emit into the atmosphere. So it's also good for that also. Those are some of the major enhancements we can get from trees and some of the benefits, of course. So one of the other things you have to do when you're assessing chances of finding a water source on the property. And again, when you're looking, you're not just looking on your property, but you're looking at the surrounding properties, what's happening, the topography there too. Because if one gentleman clear fell his whole piece of land and he might be uphill from you, of course, you know, in the rainy season time, you may have a lot of water running onto your land. If the waterway is coming your way, a lot of erosion from his place is going to end up in your place. In addition to the fact that the watershed mightn't be as so good because all the runoff water not getting to go down into the soil, and chances of finding a water source might be low in such an area. So you have to look, you have to take some of these things into consideration on finding these watersheds in area. Also, your soil type will also play a part too, because if it's clay, clay from the top, you know that water is going to run off. It's not going to stick around. If it's silty or sandy, you know, chances are better for the water to percolate and maybe come up later downstream somewhere else on the property. So chances are better in that case also. Negative impact, chances of finding what the negative impact or the combination of all I mentioned before will contribute to the demise of watershed, aquifer, fountain of the deep, literally, that once exist, still partially exist, and that's how the water gets into the aquifer. So if we have no trees, if the soil is not, might be more clayey, or you lose all the topsoil because of erosion and you're down to maybe the subsoil, you find you have much more runoff. Of course, you wouldn't have the water wouldn't have its chance to go down into the soil. If you also your drains, or you don't have things like check dams to help control the flow of water, all that kind of thing, and it just contributes to a lot of runoff of soil, sheet erosion, you name it. It will impact the chances of you having water, finding a major water source on your land. Even say if it might be to say dig a well or something like that, chances might be lower. And if some of these things, if you have such negative impacts on your land. So yet another indicator of the ecosystem, which means if there are signs of wildlife, that means food is available somewhere, the habitat, you have a habitat and an established forest also. That means a water source might be available, which is a good sign. And no major man-made impact. I mean, there will be some impact, because we have a lot of excessive hunting in Trinidad, and so that could be an impact. Development could be an impact. Even so, farming could be an impact as a result. So signs of wildlife is a good sign, and that means the place has, if it can support the wildlife, definitely if things are done right, it can support you and continue to support the wildlife. So those are some of the things wildlife will indicate. And of course, when you plan to go out there, you want to try and help maintain that. because even now too, as opposed to long ago, when any development has to take place, there's always an survey that takes place, a baseline survey, and then an extensive environmental surveys done where you check all the, well, that's largely some of the work I do. You check all the flora, the fauna, as in the birds, the reptiles, the wild, the mammals, bats included, and also you do fishing. Also in this some of the things you do in this survey. As a result, you will when you do that in the wet, you do it in the dry, and then you come back again. And in some cases, the EMA require that you monitor after a time to see how the ecosystem have changed as a result of the development. So those are some of the things you should keep in mind, because we are technically going into the habitat of the ecosystem of the wildlife, and we want to share it. Now God did it for us, and everything that's created, following on kind of like what Wade said on Sabbath. He did everything before he created man. He put everything in place for man, and man benefits from the ecosystem more than any other creature as a result. But we must learn to live in harmony, or in try and do best practices so that we can both coexist, because one without the other, we can fragment the ecosystem, and could be bad for us in the end, because the ecosystem was put in place for us to benefit more than anything else. So signs of wildlife is a good indicator. So we have also, one of the other things I mentioned was infrastructure, and it provides evidence of previous infrastructure for an activity, or some can be positive and reduce or mitigate impacts, while some can be negative. So of course, the negative one may as a result create more damage to the area, and of course the positive ones will have less. So based on the time, the ecosystem will usually, in most cases, regenerate itself to some level of normality. And that's one thing with nature. It takes time, but it can get back to almost normal. And sometimes you'd hardly even believe it was really disturbed at all. So and nature have a way of adapting very well to situations and making it work. And that's one thing, despite the infrastructure, despite what man has done, nature have its way that it can bring things almost back to normal in most cases. All right. So yet another event as a result of some direct or indirect inappropriate practices. In most cases, we have landslips. So landslips, of course, can be caused if we same thing. Everything we talked before. If we remove the trees, if we reroute water, the water course, if we don't have a buffer zone along streams, we can have landslip into the river, and of course that will also change it, redirect the water to some extent. So to reduce minor slips from progressing, you could plant trees and grass, same thing we did before, live fence, vetiver, maintain and replant forest trees in the area, avoid the redirection of natural water courses, the buffer zone come into play here, building of check dams on slopes, you name it, the same process. It's the same thing we have to do because everything is technically connected, and one negative practice can cause a lot of other effects as a result and contribute to the demise of the or the negative impact on the property, on the soil, on what you need to plant and to maintain a comfortable life in country living settings. So to reduce minor landslips, of course, again, avoid clear felling forest trees, especially if it's on a slope. When planting along hillside, again, plant along the contour of the slope. Terracing can be used, just to name a few. So these are some of the things that we continue to have to, and it's the same thing we have to do to prevent some of the other issues. We'll prevent some of these if we do the best practices. We will have less problems and less impact, and maintain good soil for the for food for us. So two other things: be informed about adjacent property or properties and the current status. It will be in your best interest and probably in neighboring property owners that you got an idea of the current and possible future intent, including method use of the land or used on the land too. So this will, of course, could help you plan and know what to check for and know what to expect when you're developing your property, and you can plan accordingly, right? As is important, especially if you are upstream. If they're supposed to be, if they are upstream and you are also downwind. So if they are upstream and they're using chemicals, or they have a chicken farm and they have runoff into the water, or maybe even if there's a quarry up the road or something like that, you know what's going to happen downstream as the water passes by your way. If there's a stream by you or something like that, or if you're going to use a water source somewhere, it's always good to know what's happening upstream. And also if you're downwind, this is another issue too again. Things to know, the wind direction, because downwind, of course, you can have things like the use of insecticides and all that kind of stuff, spray if they're doing agriculture, or maybe even if it's a chicken farm for some reason or the other, some form of animal farm upstream from you. Could be noise, that kind of thing. So trees that can be planted as a barrier or a buffer to mitigate some of the thing would be great. Indoor plants to help enhance air quality. There are a lot of indoor plants that can be used now to enhance air quality. We know now, and these plants could help get rid of some of these ill effects as a result of poor air quality. As a result, so you need to know these things to help with your location, and maybe even able to help your neighbor also. And also you have human activity. Just to note, if there's any such activity like hunting, if the land is used as a pathway or trail, or is there a road reserve, or any other thing the land was used for, the community has grown accustomed to using the land for, it would be good to know. And because if there's a road reserve, it would be good to know where the road reserve is, so you can make sure and ensure that that remains accessible and you don't do any development along that pathway. or if there's a trail, if it's really needed, if you can either reroute it, or if you can stop it if it's just a shortcut or something like that, things like that. But these social issues are some of the more challenging, because you, as a landowner, sometimes you don't directly have any direct sort of control or management to some extent of it. People always have some excuse of one or the other, but still something can be done. And in a case of such activity or entry, trespassing signage is applicable, and ensure all your boundaries are well established and you know where they are. So those are some of the things that you can do to ensure and to help mitigate these problems as a result. I know, and I do see a lot of trespassing signs on people's property. Sometimes it may look abandoned and all, or like there's no activity, but that is one of the things you can do: establish trespassing signage, nevertheless, and also as soon as they possibly can, probably use live fence and barbed wire to secure your property and make sure your boundaries are well established. Those are some of the things you can check for. There may be additional stuff, definitely, that I may not have mentioned here. This don't generally exhaust the list of things or benefits of some of these uses or problems or things you could look for when you're developing a property, to do it as eco-friendly or sustainable as possible, to ensure that you maintain good quality soil, ensure that your chances are that you can get water on the land too, in addition to reduce things like any form of major erosion or problems as a result of erosion, like losing a topsoil and quality of the soil. These are some of the things you can use, definitely, to ensure that you have a comfortable, or make it as comfortable as possible in your country living adventure, as you prepare and plan as you go out. All right, so that's it for this section. Thank you very much. And of course, if any questions, I'll be willing to try and answer as much as possible, or any additional contribution, we'll really appreciate for the whole group. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. I really appreciate it. I learned so much this evening, Richard. Thank you so much for the information. And I think it's really helpful, because I mean, some of the things you described there, I'm thinking about my experience and some of the things I would have done, and some of the things that, I'm trying to picture in my mind some of what you're saying, and I really seeing it, working out. So it helps me to be a little more conscious, in the country living experience. So, thank you for the information, So what you'll do now is I will pray, thanking God for the information. Richard, thank you very much for your time and for coming out to share. And I will pray now, and we will close off, and we allow just about 10 to 15 minutes, some questions, and then we'll call it a night. All right, so I invite everybody, just bow your heads with me, please. Close your eyes and bow your heads. Oh, Father, we thank you so much for the information, Lord. Father, we thank you for Brother Richard that has blessed us, oh Lord, with a wealth of information, Lord, that we could use, because, Lord, it will help us to be more responsible as we go into the country, Lord, Father. Lord, everything is yours. The earth is, Lord, and the fullness thereof. And Lord, we cannot just go ignorant and be negligent. And so, Lord, I thank you for what you have done for us this evening. I ask you to bless Richard and his family, bless everyone who received the information, and I pray they would use it appropriately. Be with us now, O Lord, as we engage in questions and comments. O Lord, I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, so brethren, what we'll do, your hand up, and I'll just ask you to unmute as we're still recording. I'll ask you to unmute and go ahead.
All right.
Garnet St. Louis.
Yes, St. Louis, oh sure.
Yes, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanking Brother Richards for all the information that he shared. Right, but I have two questions, I think. The first one. Now he mentioned about doing proper scouting of the premises and the property and the surroundings and so on to see if there are any situation that will impact on you, you who is going into that area. If there are any existing situations or any activity or activities that will impact negatively.
Yeah.
However, should there be a situation developing after you had set up camp and so on that will affect you, how do you go about treating with a situation like that? Let us say, in a case like upstream, contamination and different things that would affect you lower down. How do you go about putting some normalcy to that situation? How you treated that? That's the first question. Let me ask the next one time. Yeah. In the case of going into the wildlife habitat, where we have a problem right at our back doors in preserving our crops and so forth, how do we treat with the invasion of pests when they come to take our food? Do we have to have a FUL or what are we going to do? How are we going to go about trying to curtail their rampage or their destruction of our produce and crops and so forth? That is my two concerns.
Okay, to answer the first one concerning maybe future development, and like I mentioned, you could try and find out current and also future development of maybe people that might want to come in to do something, but you can only do so much. This is where probably faith may come in, and God may have it that somebody that can really come and contribute to create a real issue may not come by or may not be able to do what they plan to do for some reason or the other. However, if in the case of water, the only thing I can think you can do for some reason, it may be try and test the water, or some form of way to know what the quality is. However, even so, if that may not be possible, this is where trying to maintain a good forested area, so you can possibly by chance maybe somehow contribute to a micro watershed, just enough to supply you with a water source, or in the community, would be very, very applicable. Of course, there's no silver bullet for such a problem, or like I said, some of the things you might be doing could also benefit your neighbors. So maybe based on probably what they are doing, or maybe the operation that they may be using, or you may be able to enlighten them and maybe help them out to encourage them to do things differently. If it might be a stream, some of the other things you can do too. The same way how you could apply a check dam on your property to kind of help mitigate the flow or to reduce the velocity. that is the only, if it might be, say like for some reason, silt or something like that, you could probably try and establish check dams or settling ponds or some kind of thing like that, so the water will slow down in the case of normal flow. But in the case of a lot of rainfall, of course, the velocity of the water, the check dams may not be able to work under those circumstances. But those are some of the things you can probably do and hope that would work. But we know, of course, when we go out there, we're going by faith, and we will have things despite all we do to make things in our best interests. People may come and it may totally change the whole dynamics. But again, it's character development and it's trusting in God, and it's only He knows what and put things in His hand, and it's only He that can help us out in some of these situations. It goes for the same thing with the animals. Where I live here too, I have a mango tree, and we have a lot of parrots, and they would come and feast on the mangoes. But believe me, I cannot. Our family can't eat off all the mangoes off the tree. I would tell friends, hey, it's a mango, and come and help yourself. Same thing with the plum tree too. The birds would eat it too, and I still can't eat all the plum, and I can't keep up. So of course, the animals would feast, and I can't vex with that. Of course, the animal will disturb your crops if there are no other food source for them. And that is why I want to try and as much as possible kind of maintain their natural habitat also. You don't want to, that is why I keep saying, you don't want to clear fell the place. If you clear fell the place, of course, you eliminate the forest or the food source for the animals. So where they will come now, they'll come and feast on your crops. So you have to maintain or still keep an established forested area with enough food for these, at least with some food for these animals to eat. I'm not saying that they may not still trouble your food in it, but that is the only other way to help prevent something like that from happening. And you may lose some, yes, but like I said, in my case, I can eat all the mango, and I have one mango tree in my yard now that day, and one plum tree. So you could kind of keep or bear that in mind. And I don't know, I hope these answered your questions. I don't know if anybody have any other idea or any other thing. You could probably post it in the chat. I don't know if sure, you all could check the
yeah, we'll be looking at the chat
for that too, because we wouldn't want to go over time.
Yeah.
Such, right? So so I hope that answers your question, but that is what I will consider doing. Leaves the forest because that's where the animal will want to go. The animals don't like to come out in the open very much. They like to stay in the forest and the sheltered area. Leave your riparian zone by the water course and all that kind of stuff. Leave there for them, and it should work out. You can't have it all.
All right. Thanks for the question. So we have Oswald Charles.
I want to thank Mr. Richards for the presentation. I heard him mention that along the water courses that you should at least try to build, I think it's 100 feet, you said?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right, and you mentioned some type of plant. I think I missed that particular area. Some type of plant or so that you could plant along the course to prevent erosion. So could you just mention? I think I missed the name.
All right. What I mentioned in the United States, they recommend up to 100 feet. Standard recommendation in the United States is about 50 feet. But in Trinidad, 15 to 20 feet is acceptable to leave that area. You plant it with trees along the water course So it's considered a riparian zone or a buffer zone for the animals. So, so that's the dimensions, or that's the distance you want to maintain from the watercourse or any major stream as such and thing. Now the plants to maintain the to plant along, you could plant some of these along watercourses. You can use it for to make a live check dam. You could use it for that. You could use it for live fence. And that's the local name of the tree. They call it a live fence, because these trees, even the leaves, I think cattle will eat it and all that kind of stuff. And this tree, you keep trimming it ever so often just to keep the trunk of it alive. And it's considered a live fence. It is used for fencing or fence posts. And the other plant I talked about to aid with the erosion and stuff, I talk about the vetiver grass as a grass. And that also aid with preventing of erosion. You can use it along hillsides, you could use it along stream sides, along streams too. When you're planting it on a hillside, it is recommended you plant it along the, follow the contour of the land when you're planting any of these the grass to help mitigate slipping along the river course. They planted along the river course. Just follow the river course. So those are the two plants I mentioned. What I'll do is try to get the original name of that tree and possibly any additional trees that can be used for retaining of land also. In the future, and I'll post it up in the chat in addition to the name of the live fence.
All right. So we have Brent. Go ahead.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Brother Richard, again. That was a heavy presentation there, man. And I think at the base of what you're saying is that we have to work in harmony with the land, right? And every land has different challenges, different strengths, weaknesses, whatever. And you just have to kind of work with it. So that's heavy. And another heavy thing that came out for me is the ability to look at the trees, look at the vegetation, and the vegetation could tell a story that maybe other persons may not be able to say or willing to say or whatever it is. But, it's the same trees. You go out in the forest and you see trees and you think nothing of them. But if you really look at the size of the tree, how tall it is, and that was interesting what you shared about the Buakano as well, in terms of, okay, that's kind of, land at some, and I've seen that. So that was really great for you to share that, So there's a lot to learn. My question is, where can we find, or are there available different topographical maps of Trinidad soil type? I am very interested to know where we can find, if they're available.
Okay, I recently, that was early last year, bought a soil map of Trinidad and Tobago, complete soil map of the whole of Trinidad and Tobago. Now that map is, of course, although it have the soil maps, it is not very detailed. I have used soil map sheets, because Trinidad, I think, is broken up into, I think is about 15 or 16, I could be wrong, but about 16 different map sheets make up the whole of Trinidad and Tobago. And this is talking about topographic maps make up Trinidad and Tobago. And there are map sheets similar to the topo maps that make up the soil maps of Trinidad and Tobago. I've used them before. The place to get all maps in Trinidad is Land and Surveys on Frederick Street, opposite CIC College. And I want to believe that if I could have gotten the whole map, soil map of Trinidad and Tobago, there may be map sheets available also. Sorry, soil map sheets available at Land and Surveys. Now, when I went, I didn't request that, so they gave me what I asked for. But it's something that will really, really come in handy. And of course, those sheets are much more detailed down to the areas. And I have a document open on a desktop in front of me where the classification of the soils would change in Trinidad and Tobago in 2017. The soils haven't really changed very much. The soils are named after the first place the soil was discovered on the island. So you have soil maps, you have soil series called the Akono series, you have the Antley series, the Arangwe series, the Arena series, and then they tell you of old classification, and then they talk about the new classification of the soil. So a repo would be, just looking at it, clayey isometric type soil, and now the new classification is fine, loamy, mixed, subactive, hypothermic soil. So that is how they describe it. So it's a fine loam, and it mixes, and like I say, just like in the soil part, you know, it is about three parts, and they mix. They have all different combination of it. So if it's loam, or if it's fine loam, or if it's sandy, or if it's clay, and it's a mixture of all of that. So yes, that might be the place to check if you want to find soil maps for the area where you are. Land and survey.
Very quick other question. What kind of other maps can we ask when we go into land and surveys?
You can ask for a topo map too. That would give you like the elevation with the contours of the area. The only thing with these contour maps available locally, I think the distance between the contour is something like either 30 or 40 feet. That's the only thing. So it's, and 30 or 40 feet could mean almost like a cliff, as opposed to, you know, as opposed to not a cliff kind of. So that's the only thing with the contour maps. It's not very, very accurate, but it's still useful. It still gives you a good guideline of the topography in the area. And when you go, they'll show you the map of Trinidad, and you will see where the different sheets represent, so you can find your area. And like I said, is either 1 to 16. You could say, okay, I want a map sheet 16, a topo, or soil map for this area. And it's, I think it's $23 or $20 something per sheet. Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
No problems.
All right, so we have Noel Emmanuel.
Hi, good night, everyone. You hear me?
Yes, we're getting a lot of echo.
All right.
I don't know if I have another device close by.
All right. Let me see how I can do this. Okay. Are you hearing me clearly now?
Yes.
Hear me clearly now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Good night, everyone. Richard, a wonderful presentation, very comprehensive, and presented in a very calm and cool way, right? I appreciate it a lot. 3 short questions, right? Could you tell us a little about your qualifications, number 1? Number 2, what will you define? It may seem foolish, a foolish question, right? But what will you define as country? You know, we are fleeing from the cities because of the crime and the crises and so on that will happen. And of course, the country dwelling is more conducive to holiness and sanctification and personal development and so on. What will you really define as country? People say this place is country. I'm speaking specifically about Trinidad and Tobago, right?
Mm-hmm.
What will you define as country? Number two, in trying to allocate a piece of land, I mean, you'll want to consider some things based upon what you said in your presentation about like landslips, sinkholes, exposure to like hurricanes, exposure to earthquake faults. What advice will you give to us to guide us? Number two. And number three, to what extent can we employ technology? I mean, we live in an age of technology. Even though we're going into the country, you talk about having the water retentions and safe water and so on. What about the use of sunlight? What about the use of solar cells and the wind and stuff like that? Even the use of refuge to produce maybe gas. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thanks for your question. All right. To answer the first one, I did, well, the main thing that contribute to what I presented tonight, I did a diploma in forestry at the now UTT EKF campus. So I completed that in 2011. And in addition to that, I do work currently doing a lot of environmental surveys and assessments and that kind of stuff. Do several research projects with students at the university, the West Indies when needed, and other foreign universities from time to time. So kind of as a result of my forestry background, I was able to share much of this information that with you all this evening. The second question, recommendation for or what to look for when you're looking for property, or what you consider country in Trinidad. I live up Lopino Road, about 1.75 miles up. People consider here country, but I don't. Reason being, I mean, although it seems or you feel a whirl away, you know, sometimes I'll, even despite we have the current curfew, I think they wouldn't jail me for that, but sometimes I take my dog out for a walk after 9, and people will say, well, you brave, but really and truly, sometimes it seems like a whirl away up here, actually, because you don't have much activity, at least during that period of time, right? But I don't consider here country. What I consider country is technically almost like a property that is off-grid. They have no access to major utility supplies such as electricity or water, or it is very, it is a challenge to get, even though if there might be maybe a mile down the road or a little way off, it's a challenge even just to get the electricity to your property. I kind of consider that more off-grid. And of course, the place had to be very, very much forested, forested area. What I'll look for in a property, advice, believe me, you'll never find the perfect property. And if you find it, it might be very expensive. I kind of go in with my heart on the guidance of God for what I want. Of course, if you have water, if you have a good source of water, and you have good nice topography with a view, some people want a view. All that is nice, but that is just aesthetics. Some of the things you'll really need to what God might give you is what you might really need to develop the character He wants in you. So sometimes you may just have to let God lead. I have like a couple opportunities. There's relative lands or family land, and there's probably get your land on your own, kind of thing, and the family land is free as opposed, and I mean it real nice, very nice, undulating, a nice stream running through it, but the family issues. And if we go as a family there, we might be there by ourselves. Is the ideal location, but may not be the ideal situation, and you have to weigh some of these balances, and it's still not the ideal location because I still don't find that I like plenty bush, but as people would say, because of what I do and all that kind of thing. But I don't think my family might appreciate that. My wife and children might not appreciate that very much. So I have to still do things with them in mind and that kind of thing, and maybe not too much of a challenging location, hopefully, So those are some of the things I would consider. Of course, water is one of the definite things we could need on our property, and should be highly considered in any property that you're looking for. That's all I really want to consider: access to water, and if there's a water source or something like that. That is one of the first things I want to consider. And to answer the last question, using the technology. Yes, I currently use the technology even in the country living right now, and we're using it while we can still, as much as possible, to take advantage of it now. For me, even on my work, I, of course, use technology to go where they might tell me to go or to find, as I would say. And I tell people sometimes I am the type of wannabe bushman because I got into this thing late, and I rely a lot on instruments to find my way. I don't know if God have it that way, so I wouldn't get too much of a big head, but I don't have very good photographic memory at all. So if I walk into the forest, sometimes if I turn around, I always have to be looking behind me. I may not, depending on the location, I mightn't be able to know where I came from. So I rely a lot on technology. Yes, I thank God that He always gets me out when I go, but we have the technology to use now, and we can, and we still should. I also always walk the compass, nevertheless I have the technology. Always still walk the old school because it can fail on you. I use the technology to help with mapping, even with country living too. Right now, my phone, I can share the app if anybody interested, if they're interested in mapping and that kind of stuff, I can share it in the group. And that, I usually go to work. When I work, sometimes I have a handheld GPS receiver, and I have my phone, and I rely on the phone. Seem to be more reliable than the actual Garmin GPS unit I'll go with. So yes, we can use the technology still, and I still recommend it to make things happen faster and easier for you. Concerning the alternative energy and alternative means of probably making gas, generating current, yes, I highly recommend it. A lot of these methods will also, like making a biogas actually, and that's the thing about it, is a natural gas made in nature, clean burning. The waste as a result of that goes straight into your soil to enhance your soil and all that kind of stuff. It really almost like a God-given gift, some of these alternate means of making fuel, even simple like making biodiesel. The byproduct is using the lye, which you could actually make from charcoal. Everything could be found naturally and be used, and you get byproduct to make soap at the end of the day, and you get your fuel on the side. And all these things work really, really well and in hand with no negative impact to the environment to some extent. And it is all there ready for us to use. And it's through the technology actually right now, I am learning or knowing how to do some of these things. But like I tell some of my friends, I cannot do everything. So yes, I know about it, but I may not go into it because I'm doing other things. And of course, there are things for everybody else to, play a part and could come on a forum similar like this and even share with others about their experience and the knowledge that they found. And things like electricity generation, even water pumps, manual products that we could use outside there, equipment that we can use out there to make our life as useful or as normal or as efficient as possible is very, very relative. And I find that there's a place for that continually throughout the experience in country living. I hope that answers your question, Noel.
All right. So we have 3 more hands. We'll take these 3, Richard, and then we will tie up. Yeah. So we have Liz Dubois. I think that's the correct pronunciation. Liz? Yes.
Good night, everyone. I don't know if you're hearing me. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So good night, Sir Richard. I really enjoyed your presentation. I'm so happy I was invited to your forum. It was simply amazing, and I felt like I learned so much from you.
Amen.
So, I so thank God for this because, I live in Brooklyn while I'm originally from Trinidad. I live in Brooklyn, and, this have been.
There's mute yourself.
I'm sorry, forgive me. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I live out here in Brooklyn, and just yesterday, myself and, a couple of sisters, we were talking about moving out to Brooklyn. I think she's in Queens, but we were talking about getting out of the city and, finding a place to go to. And, one of the things was that a lot of Adventists were in America here. They're moving to Tennessee. I happen to like Connecticut. And one of the things I was really concerned about was, landslides and flooding, because those are some of the things we're really very concerned about. And I was trying to figure out, that's why I was so happy to hear your presentation tonight. What kind of soils are you really looking for to determine what will be a landslide? Because what I'm recognizing, since the judgment of God is upon the face of the earth, all over the earth, you have major landslides with you're seeing mountains literally falling down in China, in Japan, all these places. You're seeing some strange things happening all in South America. So what are you really looking for? And I am happy you spoke about the topographic map, because I'm going to go and search for one of that now of Tennessee and Connecticut and kind of figure out and pray and ask God to lead me. But could you give me some ideas what to look for, what kind of soil to look for to determine if this soil is going to, have a major landslide, that kind of thing. What am I supposed to be looking for if I'm looking for, for probably a piece of land to buy?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for your question, Liz. And the soil that retains a whole lot of water is what might contribute to, or what might develop a landslide. Even when landslip here in Trinidad, one of the things that they kind of sort of recommend that you do is that you spread, or if you have any land movement problems is that you spread like tarpaulin or something like that over it so that it wouldn't get more, it wouldn't, more water, it wouldn't be exposed to more moisture or more rain directly so that it could get the soil loose, because what happens is that the soil gets so so saturated with water that it's kind of pulsify or just turns into slush, and eventually with the weight it creates almost like an avalanche, and that is actually called, the term they actually use is, it's technically is a mudslide, and it's called a laha. That's the term that they use in forestry. It's considered a laha, and it just kind of almost like an avalanche, and it will come down with the trees, everything. That had to be caused by a lot of rain, because in such a case, even down to the aquifers will be filled and cannot take any more water, and as a result, the water just start kind of some extent rising, and eventually would just take down the whole mountainside. Somebody that actually study more or might have studied more hydrology might be able to explain even better that on this phenomena than I would. But from a forestry perspective, that is what would happen. The aquifers will totally be filled. Soil will start retaining the water because it cannot go down into the aquifer. And because of the weight of the trees and everything, and the mud so saturated or the soil so saturated, it's just gonna give. That's what's gonna happen. Now, the only way I think we can prepare for something like that, it all depends on the ability of the aquifer. If you have a good aquifer, well, that would reduce, and that is the only way you might be able to find out of such a location that can retain that. Places where you find the soil might be clay, might be a somewhat kind of good location, because the clay soil would not absorb the water, and it also enhance the fact that the water will run off really, really fast. So you find you have no collection of water. That's the onlyest. Places with silt, places with sandy soil mightn't be able to stand up. So that might be, and based on my knowledge or what how I understand the development of such a problem, that might be the choice. You might look for a place with a good clay bed or a high clay content. That might be my choice out of a silty or sandy or a loomy area. I hope that answers your question. Of course, if anybody have any other things to share on that matter, would be good, but that is what I think. Clay soil might be the best location.
Okay. Thanks for that question, Liz. We have Sister Curl. Go ahead.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Brother Richards, well, you just kind of answered the question that I was about to ask, because yesterday I went up on my land and there it is. I now have a cliff. Well, a bad landslide. And everything that I planted, all the trees are now gone.
Whoa.
So I'm thinking that the water table is extremely high, but beside that, I think the water is now undermining under as well. Mm-hmm. So the rain did its work as well.
Yeah.
But the water is now undermining. So it apparently like it cut the land.
Yeah.
So I don't know now what to do. Do you have any advice as to how to now treat with this matter? because I don't know what to do.
What location is this?
This is in Tamina.
Tamina.
So the soil is really sapity.
Yeah. Sapity.
Right, but that's a mixture.
Right.
You have a little bit of clay, you have some sand, you have gravel, you have that kind of thing. But on my side of the land, it's more sandy. It's not that clean, so that the water will run off so easily.
Right. Yeah.
I have that type of soil that I have is a little bit more loomy.
Right.
So that planting is fantastic to plant. Because it's easier to dig, it's a little better in terms of your roots being able to penetrate, go down and anchor well, and so on. But in terms of water, well, boy, it really do a hat trick.
Yeah, it takes up all the water.
It taking the water, and yesterday when I went, I was in shock.
Wow.
Because if you jump, I don't know where you will land up. Off the edge of there. No, unfortunately, I didn't take any photographs of it. I was in so much shock that all the trees, avocado, pomarac, all those trees, cashew was gone.
All right. And it was a hillside originally before, right?
Not really. It was just a slope.
A slope, okay. All right.
It was just a slope, but now that slope is now cut away and make a clean landslide, a clean, I don't want to say the word cliff because cliff will sound like, a really massive drop, but it is a great drop.
Yeah.
In comparison to what it was before.
All right. Well, some of the things I'm thinking here is where the water used to run before under normal circumstances when rain falls. What the water used to do?
It will run down the side. Remember, it was a slope, right?
Yeah.
So it will find its way and run down one side of the slope and then the other. But what I strongly believe, or what I saw, that there is a well or a pond that is to the top of the land that is now, well, the aquifer is probably full. So it just probably undermined because there was nowhere else for the water to run. So it cut away the land. So now I don't know now what to do. I just heard you say to put a piece of tarpaulin over it.
Yeah, well,
but I don't know if that would work. It looked like I might have to bench the land.
Well, that would be the next thing. And actually benching the land technically is creating terraces technically. And on each
but will that hold it?
Terraces, yes, but you'll have to plant vetiver grass, and everything have to do in line with the contour of what remain, and that is where the contour planting and even again, based on the type of soil that you have, will determine some of the measures you'd use to plant or develop. That place would have been ideal for developing probably terracing, and also look into the management of the drainage to prevent, of course, what happened, right? But land holding with vetiver grass would be the ideal thing to try and put in place as soon as possible too, eventually.
Well, I'm thinking if I plant the grass just as it is right now, will it hold it? Even though let's say you don't bench it, but just as the land slip, you can plant on the face of the slip, and then you plant below, so that it holds the soil now together as is. Will that work? We can try that, or you're
might.
saying a definite benching?
It might, definite benching, and it will help too, but at least that initial planting should help too. And that is something I'd really like to come and would like to really take a view of, and probably help make some recommendations on how to go forward with. That might be the best thing. And even if you had pictures that I could have seen, you know, that might have helped. Do you have any pictures before also?
I don't think so. I really don't. You see, when I go on the land, my phone is never with me because of the fear of resting it down somewhere, and then you can't find it back.
Okay.
And that has happened to other people before. You rest down the phone because, you know, your toting is uphill, downhill. You're moving with tools in your hand, and you rest down the phone and you just don't. So I never really took photographs, but I definitely will try to take some photographs and send to you. Or you're welcome to come along.
Well, I was there. I was up on that side Friday, and most likely because things have changed this week, I think I may make plans to go back up sometime later on in this week. So,
well, normally we go up on a Sunday. So if any Sunday that you're available, you can get my number and you could let me know, and you could come along and just see, and you could make whatever recommendations. But the Betty Bear grass, it's I know I used to see it in the government farms, but in recent times, I am not seeing it. So I don't know now where to go and get the grass to plant, because normally you used to see it a lot.
Yeah.
But now I'm not seeing it as much.
Yeah, well, all I could say is probably somebody have a monopoly on it, more of a monopoly on it now. But
well, it may look like I'll have to go and pull some from by a riverbed somewhere.
But I checked out some sources actually, and I haven't really confirmed the availability from them and that kind of stuff. And I can possibly share it in the chat, on the WhatsApp chat.
Well, if you see it anywhere, you could let me know. I mean, I'm in plant shops very, very regularly. And, if I see it, well, now I know, okay, I need to get some at least to plant, but I'm just not seeing it anywhere.
Okay. I'll put my number in the chat, my WhatsApp number in the chat. So if you can possibly contact me, or anybody who also interested in contacting me on anything regarding any matter such as this, right?
Yes, all right, very good. So we're taking Sister Christopher as the last hand. If anyone had anything else to add, or what you could do is take Brother Richard's number or table the question. It's already 11 p.m. Yes, p.m., right? So we're going with Sister Christopher now, and then we will we have just 2 announcements, and then we will close.
Yeah, sure. And also you could just put my number in the chat, because yeah, okay. Yeah. Yes, Sister Noreen.
Oh yes, good night, Richard. Thanks again for a very informative session. I really appreciated it. I just wanted to add something to the question the person asked concerning how far to build from the river. And you did mention that we have this 5-meter reserve, which is 15 to 20 feet thereabouts in Trinidad. But I just wanted to add that there is a difference between in terms of where you can build it. So even though they have given a 5-meter reserve for the river, from the river to develop that buffer, so to speak, that is not the building setback.
No, that is not.
Building setback is usually between 10 meters, which is like 32 feet, up to about 45 feet. So it does not mean that you can build from that 15 feet, right? From the river. Just wanted to add that for clarification.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Sister Christopher.
Welcome.
And that buffer zone is totally a line of trees of vegetation.
That's right.
From the vegetation, the 10 meters, Sister Christopher mentioned, for your dwelling, right? So that's the guide.
Repeat that, Richard. 10 meters from where?
From the end of the vegetation or the end of the buffer zone. You have the river. You have 5 meters to 15 feet to 20 feet buffer zone of vegetation along the river.
Right.
From the edge of on that outer edge of the buffer zone, you have 10 meters to your dwelling or to your house.
Okay, right.
Yes.
So you had to keep that in mind.
That's good information. Very good, important information, yeah. But those who close to riverbeds and whatnot.
Nah, because of course flooding and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
too. You got to be wise.
Correct.
Right? So that is the things.
All right.
I just want
closing statement, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say some people putting in the chat, the other 3 hours trying to remember Sandbox was one of them. And you have also Olive and all those soft trees are some of the trees you'll find in the intermediate forest, that kind of thing. Thanks for all the contributions in the chat for everyone. I saw somebody wrote about the FAO. The soil map is not clear. The soil map that I had access is not from the FAO, and that map is very, 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 very clear, and is much more useful than the online maps that I've seen while looking. Again, to showing what I put in my number in the chat. If anybody have any other questions or stuff, you could touch base with me and about any of the topic mentioned today, and I'll try my best to help out. Sister who asks about the land at Slip to, she can contact me and I can make arrangements to take a visit and take a look and see what's happening, what has happened as a result. And remember, I wanted to mention to her too, I use my phone is not just for calling. I consider my phone a tool. It's a tool in our arsenal. We have to look at it as a tool in our arsenal and to use it for our benefit or for anything that will help us directly in country living. And that's what I consider my phone. It's not just to make calls and send WhatsApp message. It's a tool. We have to look at it as that also.
Good.
Yes. Thanks very much.
Yes, so thanks very much, Richard, for the time in I mean, words can't express, but thanks very much. We know we'll hear from you again. And brethren, let us just say a final prayer, and then we would just stop the recording and have 2 announcements. Father, we thank you for all that you have taught us tonight using your manservant, Richard Smith, in a special way, Lord. I ask, Father, that as we continue to use our talents to serve you, that we would allow these talents to make room for us, Lord, as we share with one another, dear Father, increasing faith and hope and encouragement. And even as we look at these earth matters, Lord, we continue to see your creative power and just to know that you are God in this tremendous way that we cannot even comprehend. We just have to accept it by faith. So we thank you, Lord, for what we were able to hear and understand this evening. Bless us, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.